Our next speaker is Dr. Bob Cerrato. He's an associate professor here at SOMAS, and actually was one of the original authors with the 2001 breach report. He wrote the section on shellfish there, and made some predictions and comments about what he thought at that time, if there were to be a breach, what the conditions were that might affect shellfish and in what way they would be affected. And if you read that chapter, you'd see that certain conditions might positively influence shellfish, others might negatively influence shellfish. And I don't know whether we're at the point yet where we can know for sure which way it's going, but I think Bob has some interesting information to share with us about that from his recent work on that. Are you ready? Okay. So, Bob Cerrato.
So I don't know if speakers are working, but I'll speak loud. So I'm going to, like Brad did, I'm going to stick with some of the predictions from the 2001 report. And some of them we can address, but the ones in blue here we can talk a little bit about. And in particular, growth, hard clams, and reduced residence time of water peak. I got some indirect evidence about that, not any direct measurement, and whether the higher salinity is attracting some high salinity predators. And so at the time of the report, there was a list of both negative effects and positive effects. The negative effects on clams was going to be due to things like higher salinity, cooler spring and summer temperatures, which would actually affect growth. Decrease in food quantity. Ocean water coming in has less phytoplankton in it than bay water. And the positive effects would include perhaps increased flushing, warmer winter temperatures, so you get maybe better overwinter survival. Cooler summer temperatures. The hard clams in the bay characteristically have very distinct summer growth rates. And so if you're counting growth rates on the shell of a hard clam, it's not years, you're getting both summer and winter growth rates. So you need to take the number of growth rates on the shell and divide by 2. We can't address that, unfortunately, but increases in food quality. So in general, the ocean water coming in tends to have higher fractions of larger phytoplankton. Okay, so I can do some of this, but not all of the predictions. And the shell growth part is probably the strongest information that we've got. And I'm going to talk about it, and then Chris Goldberg's going to talk about it. So hopefully we're going to have a consistent picture, but we'll see what happens. There has been other breaches, and the first one that anyone, as far as I know, looked at was in Mauritius Bay in 1980, and this picture is an aerial photo of that breach. And here's Mauritius Inlet, and this is in January 1980. I think the breach occurred in January 1980. This is just a few weeks after the breach. And here's the breach, and it was several times wider than the inlet, and it remained open for almost an entire year, till December 1980. And so there was 1980 was the year with the breach open. 1981 was the year with after the closure. And Beth Turner looked at hard clam growth in clams from 3 locations. One location near the inlet, and then a second location almost as far east as you can go in Mauritius Bay, almost into the narrow area that leads to Quantock Bay, and then the far western part of the bay, almost into the narrows that lead to Great South Bay. And what she found was that there is, in all 3 instances in 1981, after the breach was closed, there was slightly greater growth in hard clams, but the most important one is this increase in growth, almost a 2-fold increase in shell growth in 1981 that we think was attributed to the breach. This area was probably the lowest salinity area in Mauritius Bay, and so the breach would have changed conditions there more than it would have changed conditions at the other two locations. So the suggestion is that there's an increase in growth once you close the breach. Here's data from this study done by Howard Rubin and Army Corps of Engineers, and Howard Rubin was one who talked to him about this. The study involved parkland growth from June to mid-October, and it was done in 2 years, 2001 and 2003, and there were 3 locations, Moriches Inlet, the Forge River, and then Smith's Point. So this is in the Narrows that leads out of Moriches and into Great South Bay. And this is the percent shell growth, and the black bars are 2001 and the gray bars are 2003. And so in both years, the Forge River had higher growth than Moriches Inlet. So the inlet had the lowest growth rate between those two. And if you look at both, this is shell growth, this is tissue growth, the same pattern emerges. And the data suggests that some of this may be due to differences in chlorophyll, differences in food quantity. The slowest growth rate was at Moriches, the highest at Forge, and so that corresponds well to food quantity. And the low growth at Smith Point might be attributed to the really high temperatures at that location during both years. Okay, so these results may be because of much higher temperatures. So again, it fits the pattern that right in the proximity of an inlet, there's slower growth both in shell growth and in tissue growth from this study. And these are more complicated than I'm showing, but at least you're getting the general idea. This is a study by Weiss et al. So this involved both Chris Gobler and Brad Peterson, and it was done in 2004 and 2005, and it's looking at clam growth from April to November. So the clams were planted in April, and they were removed in November, and these plots showed the total amount of growth, or the sizes. They started out the same size, and it's shell length in black bars and dry weight, tissue dry weight in the white bars, and this is 2004 and 2005. And in both years, the slowest growth, the sites are different in the 2 years. This one was done in Shinnecock Bay, and so this site here is Shinnecock Inlet, and the stations go west into Quantock Bay. And in 2004 in Shinnecock, the slowest growth, both in terms of shell length and tissue weight, was near the inlet, and the highest growth was at some intermediate location in the bay. And the same pattern shows up in 2005 if you look at these first 3 sets of bars. This is Fire Island Inlet, this is Central Great South Bay, and this is Belfort Bay, and the slowest growth, both in terms of shell and tissue, was at near Fire Island Inlet. If you look at some of the environmental data, the pattern is very, very consistent in this study. The little blue circles are lows, and the red circles being highs. And at Shinnecock Inlet, that station had the lowest mean temperature, the lowest maximum temperature, the highest salinity, the lowest mean cold chlorophyll, and the lowest mean chlorophyll lead greater than 5 microns. Okay, so it was an extreme either at the low end in terms of temperature and food, and at the high end near salinity. The same pattern shows up for Fire Island Inlet in 2005. The slowest growth at Fire Island was due to low mean temperature, a low maximum temperature, highest salinity, low whole chlorophyll and whole fraction of chlorophyll greater than 5 microns. In addition, the highest growth in both years was at a station that had the highest amount of chlorophyll greater than 5 microns. Okay, so it wasn't an extreme in terms of temperature or salinity or even the total amount of chlorophyll, but it did have the highest amount of larger chlorophyll phytoplankton cells of any of the stations. And that holds true also for the 2005 to the east. An intermediate site that has the highest growth also has the highest fraction, greater 5 micron fraction. And this is just a plot of those chlorophyll data, so you can see that there's this inverse relationship that shows up in Great South Bay and Shinnecock Bay. This one's for Shinnecock Bay in 2004. Here's Shinnecock Inlet, and then you travel west into Quantock Bay, and this is total chlorophyll, and the amount of chlorophyll goes up. But there's an inverse relationship to the amount of chlorophyll greater than 5 microns, and it's highest at Shinnecock Inlet, and the on the surface, right, and it's lowest in Quantock Bay on the surface, right. The same is true in Great South Bay in 2005. As you go from Flyer Island Inlet to Belfort Bay, there's an increase in chlorophyll and a decrease in the fraction of chlorophyll that's greater than 5 microns. So this inverse relationship tends to hold in a lot of parts of the bay. Here's an example of how it seems to relate to growth. In addition to the Weiss-et-al. study, there was a study by Amy Streck that involved Darcy and I, and here is a small juvenile clam. It's not directly an inlet-related type of study, but Copay and Babylon are two sites that are to the west of Fire Island Inlet, and Patchogue is east of Fire Island Inlet. But as you go from west to east in Great South Bay, there was a pattern, at least for these plants, of decreased growth. It didn't correspond well to whole chlorophyll content, but it certainly corresponded well to the amount of chlorophyll greater than 5 microns. And in this case, it's these two top sets of bars. So highest in Copay, where you had high growth, intermediate in Babylon, and then smallest in Patchogue, where you had the lowest growth plant. Just to beat it to death a little bit more, there was also a study. A lot of these were done, by the way, as part of the hard clamming initiative that Seagrant sponsored, and so there's a flurry of activity looking at bivalve and bivalve ecology, hard clam ecology, for a period of time. Seagrant generated a lot of money for that study. So this is a study looking at reproductive output, and I sort of glued out areas outside of the bay that we're talking about today. But if you look at this, there's a pattern here. This first station is western Great South Bay, then there's central Great South Bay, eastern Great South Bay, and then Shinnecock. You see this pattern of reproductive output, and if you look at the greater than 5 micron part of the phytoplankton, it follows that pattern very well. So the suggestion here is that this reproductive output is in part due to the amount of chlorophyll that's greater than 5 microns. And again, it's an oversimplification. They also found things like food supply and condition previous fall to play a role in reproductive output as well. And the previous slide, another complication that comes about is that even if the greater than 5 micron fraction is high, if that fraction contains things like pennate diatoms, that may also alter the growth rate of plants. Pennate diatoms are not great plant foods. So anyway, if you look at all these studies together, the suggestion is that in the immediate vicinity of the breach, there's going to be a decrease in plant growth. At some intermediate conditions in the bay, you probably maximize growth and fecundity. And then if you get far enough into the bay where the chlorophyll, especially the size fraction that's greater than 5 microns, goes down, you may have lots of food available in terms of quantity, but the quality is low, and decrease might decline because of that, because temperatures are too high, and maybe several other factors. But it's a pretty consistent pattern. Hopefully, Chris will support this, maybe not. We're doing a study right now, and we'll see what he has to say. So let's move on. I'm going to talk this idea of residence time of larvae. So the prediction was made in the report that because of a breach, larvae would be washed out of the bay. The residence time would go down, and I'm sorry I missed Bob Wilson's talk, but the idea was that their larvae would spend less time in the bay, and so the sets of bivalves would go down. I don't have any direct information for that, but as Brad mentioned, there was a massive set of blue mussels in the bay this year, and I could demonstrate that to you. These are some sampling stations that we were running a beam trawl to look at blue crab populations. The red circles are the absence of blue mussels, the green are presence of blue mussels. I hope you can see that. I tried to make them the circles big enough to see, but when they got too big, they looked really funny. So so this is April and May, and you can start to see these were all small mussels. You can start to see that if I backed off and just showed you April, they would be even closer into Belfort Bay. But you start to see some mussels showing up. By June, they were just about everywhere in the bay. And these were all small mussels, a few millimeters to maybe a centimeter in size by about June or so. So there's evidence of a pretty large set of bivalves in the bay. So this idea that you're going to sweep larvae out of the bay is at least not the case for blue mussels, and hopefully it's not for other bivalve species. This set occurred before ctenophores reached their peak abundances, and one of the things that one of Darcy Lonsdale's students showed was, her name is Marion McNamara, showed was that ctenophores peak in abundance in the middle of July, right around the time that hard clams are spawning, and they have the capability of raising down bivalve larvae that are in the water. Okay, so this occurred. Where's yours here? Did I get that right? Okay. So this occurred before that peak in abundance, and so it may be that mussels know what's going on in a setting before the ctenophores reach their peak. Another question that was addressed is that or prediction is that marine crabs would increase in abundance. And again, it's early to have any direct information, but I can show you the fate of this mussel set in the bay, and it's kind of interesting, and it suggests predation. So here are the mussels in June and July. They're not at every station now. They're starting to break up. They're still pretty well distributed through the bay. And then by September, November, they're restricted to locations primarily in Belfort Bay and in Fire Island Inlet. So that set was pretty large. It occurred, peaked at least in June, and then started to break down again. And they're almost all gone from the bay. So one explanation of this is that the crabs had some 95 millimeter, 10 millimeter mussels are probably great crab food. Another explanation might be that the mussels were, we did notice that the mussels are associated with seaweed and seem to be attached to seaweed, and when the seaweed started to break down, the mussels started to die. And I'm not positive about that explanation, and we're going to do a better job next year of keeping track of sets like this. But it's very, very interesting, and it is consistent with a predation effect or a change in substrate in the bay. The reason why I think that predation might be playing a role is that we're seeing a redistribution of predators that we think are sensitive to high salinity. If you go back to a study that was done in the late 70s by Wafura, and run by Greg Green, and you look at the distribution of lady crabs, Olytes ocellatus, it was mainly, lady crabs were mainly in the western part of Great South Bay, associated with the inlet off of Babylon, places like that, and they weren't allowed to sample on Blue Point's property. They could probably do that now, but they weren't allowed at the time. But there were no lady crabs in the eastern part of the bay, and Greg produced this plot. This is the abundance of lady crabs versus salinity, and this range goes from 25 to 31, and they stopped seeing lady crabs at about 27, 28 parts per thousand salinity at the time. And then they found high abundances at higher salinity. If we take a look at the data that we've been collecting, and again, it's just all partially processed. If you go back to 2007, there's a hint of lady crabs associated with the inlet, a couple in other places. In 2013, we also see a presence of lady crabs around the inlet and a few other places. And though in 2014 we're seeing them spread eastward. And this is not very dramatic looking, but once we process another data set that we have where we rain trawl data set where we've been sampling every 2 weeks, we're going to have both a better spatial and a better temporal resolution of the distribution of these crabs. And it's going to show really high numbers of crabs in the eastern part of the bay where they hadn't been before. In addition, we're finding in Belfort Bay some predators that probably would not have been there had breach not occurred. We're seeing rock crabs, answer crabs, and they're also another high salinity species. So it's very, at least our impression is that we are seeing more higher salinity species in this part of the bay than we've seen in the past. I'm going to finish up now. I didn't talk about a number of predictions. Slower development of eggs and larvae, bivalve eggs and larvae in the water column because of lower temperatures in the spring, increased winter survival, fewer growth interruptions. We just haven't started looking at any of that stuff yet. I don't know, hopefully Chris will talk about this, but there was a brown tide last year, there's a brown tide this year, and it may be in different places and it may have changed its duration, but I think George probably filled out on this. And I wanted to lastly mention some confounding factors that I think have to be taken into account to make some, to come to some conclusions about the effect of breach. And one is this effect of dredging Fire Island Inlet. Charlie talked about it earlier. I think we really need to account for it. I think that the high salinities that we're seeing in the middle of the bay may be in part due to this dredging, and hopefully some modeling and some additional measurements will shed some light on that. But I think it's an important consideration. So not only have a breach, but we've got a Fire Island Inlet that may be allowing more water in and out of the bay. Secondly, last winter had a really, really cold spell, and I'm not sure that we're ever going to be able to get at its effect, but we can at least think of what that might do. Something like blue crabs are very sensitive to cold winter temperatures, and I was afraid that we were going to go out and sample for blue crabs this year and not find any. Luckily, that wasn't true, and they're out there, but there was a cold period that may have had an influence on what we're finding in the bay this year. And so it's sort of another reason why we should be doing this over multiple years and not just 1 or 2 years. And then one of the things that we're starting to find in Belfort Bay is southern species that are occasional visitors here, and they probably wouldn't have been here without the breach. Anybody who has had an aquarium on Long Island knows that if you go to Oak Beach near Fire Island Inlet and you drag a deep seine, you can find tropical species in the summertime in west Fire Island Inlet. I think the same is becoming true off of Belfort. We're seeing species that are coming up as larvae, getting into the bay through the new inlet, We found 2 new species of crabs that I've never seen before in Belfort Bay. Maybe a 3rd species. We don't have one individual of it. And so I think that the new inlet may be doing things that we hadn't anticipated, and one of the things is letting more southern species in. By southern, I mean this one crab species that we found, its range is close to Cape Hatteras to the Gulf. And it's in Belfort Bay. Whether it survives winter or not, I don't know. But if we have a mild winter this year, it might be that crab is becoming more established and we'll see it again next year. Okay? So that's all I have. I'm happy to take any questions.
I don't really have a question. I just have a comment. I think the blue mussel story is fascinating, but since you were teaching, you didn't hear Chris talk about brown tide this fall, and it's my recollection that the blue mussels are one of the most sensitive of all the shellfish species to brown tide. So that might be another factor playing
in terms of the crash of the...
Yeah, but I guess you'd have to look more at the distribution of brown tide and so forth. That might be part of it.
Okay, so that's a third part.
Typical in Iceland, we get blue mussel sets, and as soon as the bay temperature escalates, warms up, they typically die out.
See, now, I wouldn't say that if you asked me, I wouldn't say that high temperatures would be a factor in mortality of blue mussels, because they're up in intertidal and they see really, really high temperatures when they're exposed to air. But I don't know.
Similar pattern in Shinnecock Bay, though. That is, there's a good set every year, and then they stay around the inlet where it's cool, and then they die off in the warmer parts. But there could be a predation role there as well.
You mentioned 2 possible reasons for that die-off, one being that the mussels may have been attached to grasses that had to die off when the cold weather set in, the seaweed. Have you seen any other information that would, say that that's something that's been observed before?
I haven't started looking, but we did get a ton of seaweed,
right.
And you'll see pictures in a little while.
The reason I bring that up is because I've seen unbelievable sets at the various inlets on the ocean sides that, in the spring, early summer, it's incredible, and by the late summer, they're completely gone. And that can only be from predation.
Bob, we're happy to share our shellfish survey data with you guys. And I just want to mention that what you wouldn't have seen in your beat call is an incredible abundance of razor clams that we've been seeing in the central part of the bay.
Where before they were only eastern.
In 2008 we had none. We were already seeing a slight an increase before the new inlet, but since then it's been gangbusters to the point of averages of upwards of 10 per square feet. So real high numbers.
Oh, that's it.
So what's been happening?
I think they had, if you look at their distribution in the 70s, they were sort of in the eastern part of the bay. So I don't know if it makes sense for them to go further west.
But I'll share that with you,
Okay.
and you can add it to your